To learn some more about democracy vouchers and the campaign that created them, we're joined now by Estevan Muñoz-Howard, one of the lead organizers of the Honest Elections Seattle campaign. Estevan, welcome.
Thank you.
So before we actually dive into the campaign, I want to rewind a little bit, because when we were talking earlier, you were describing how this idea didn't just appear on the scene in the 2015 election cycle, that there had been a lot of groundwork laid prior, including a failed ballot measure a few years prior. Talk to me about that path to this campaign.
Yeah, I think the roots of the Honest Elections Seattle campaign actually stretch back to, I guess, 2007. At the time, there were a group of us that were volunteering with, at the time, Washington Public Campaigns, which is now Fixed Democracy First, to overturn the ban on public financing in the state. And we were successful, thankfully, and a group of us, I think about 7 of us, broke off and decided to launch a local ballot initiative called Vote Clean Seattle. And in 2008, we went as far as having a large successful kickoff with some featured speakers, raised some money, did some polling, and then the economy tanked, and we decided it wasn't quite the right time. But that was, I think, really the origins of this process, because it was the same folks who were involved in succeeding efforts. In 2012, we got together again and ran the failed 2013 campaign. Although in
that campaign would have done what?
That campaign would have implemented a bare public matching system. It would have been a 6-to-1 super match.
So unlike vouchers, it's a match that if a candidate, well, describe how that would work.
Yeah, so it's similar. It was based on some other programs that exist around the country. There's a really successful one in New York that was credited with the success of Bill de Blasio's mayoral campaign. And essentially, you contribute $10 or $50, and it's matched 6-to-1 with public funds. And so it makes it more feasible for a candidate to engage smaller dollar donors, to be more intentional about reaching more people rather than more money, and it can still run a competitive campaign.
But that failed in 2013.
That failed in 2013 for, I think, a couple of reasons. For one thing, it was a group of 7 of us without a ton of experience and the relationships that I think are really needed to mount a successful campaign. It was also a really short time frame. There are a lot of local organizations, expected partners that already had priorities set for the year, and they just weren't quite ready to shift on the time frame that we were really hoping that they would. But I think in the end we were able to really fail forward, and this is something we talk about a lot. We were able to build those relationships and show that even though we raised very, very little money and had a very minor campaign, we still got 49.63% of the vote, and we lost by about 1,400 votes. And so I think that was really a sign to folks that there was something here. There was some momentum that we were able to build. And literally the next day, we got phone calls from local partners, from national funders. People were really interested in getting involved.
Saying, let's try this again.
Yeah, they felt like, this was a missed opportunity. And again, for very valid reasons, folks were not engaging in that process originally.
Now, but what's interesting, though, is that once you had that moment after the close, almost win in 2013, you didn't just go back in 2015 with the same policy idea. You came back now with this different policy idea of democracy vouchers, which are different from a simple matching system. Why?
Well, we were able to set our sights a little bit higher. That was one thing that I was really excited to see, is that as more people came to the table, we were able to get more voices, more institutional support to do deeper research. And we realized that there was something bigger we could strive for. Actually, in 2014, we did try to go back through City Council and bring another similar bill to the voters the following year. And that failed the summer of 2014.
So you had to go to the people.
Yeah, we were trying to go the council route because we felt like it was going to be a little bit easier if we could just get the votes.
Yeah.
We wouldn't have to invest quite as much in the campaign, engaging folks early on. And when that failed, we realized that we don't have to tie ourselves down by what is going to be politically palatable to run through City Council. We can actually engage a much broader set of stakeholders in deciding what exactly we want to do, and we can go the initiative route, put it straight to the people.
But also with a more ambitious idea, right? I mean, democracy vouchers had not yet been tried or implemented in the United States.
Yeah, it's something that a lot of us had heard about, we'd read about. It sounded exciting, but there hadn't been a ton of movement on it because it was untried, because nobody had really nobody had put it forth as a priority, as something that they wanted to test in their own community.
So what strikes me, I mean, when you rewind all the way to 2007, two things in just already what you're saying. Number one, just a hearty little band of people, right, getting this going. Wasn't some massive alignment of big institutional structures till late in the game. But the other is when you talked about failing forward, I'm wondering how quickly you were able and willing to learn lessons about, that failed because X, and how quickly you were able to apply those lessons of reorganizing power and reactivating things in a different way.
Yeah, I think we were open to learning about it as we went along. I mean, I think we realized some of the mistakes we made in that 2013 campaign, where we realized, we should have spent a little bit more time focusing on getting some of those stakeholders together rather than lobbying City Council and educating, the Seattle Ethics and Elections Commission to make sure that people understood what this could mean for the city.
For the uninitiated, when someone like you says the stakeholders, getting people around the table, I have a very clear picture in my mind, but for someone who may not, what does that mean? Who are you talking about? What has to happen, and how do you get them to this imaginary table?
Yeah, so there's a lot of a lot of phone calls, a lot of meetings, but essentially what my mind goes to is this meeting that we had, and I think in February of 2014, is maybe January, February, where we brought together a group of, I think, maybe there were 30 people in the room, and that included, there were some elected officials, there were some union folks that were represented there, there's local grassroots organizations, there were individual, just community leaders, activists. And we, at the time, we were called Fair Elections Seattle, and it was just a volunteer grassroots group that was convening these conversations, bringing folks together. And so it was really just calling people that we thought would be interested, that would have a stake in this sort of a campaign, that would also be able to provide something, that would actually want to contribute and participate and provide a little more sustainability to the campaign. Because we were all, as volunteers, we were kind of tapped out at that point. And so it felt really good to have a larger group of folks at the table that could carry more of the weight and make it all much more likely to succeed.
One of the things that the good news about bringing a larger table like that is you have allies and you have other resources to bring to bear. The bad news is, I imagine, it's harder to make decisions on direction or on strategy or even on message, right?
Yeah.
How did you navigate that once the 2015 campaign was getting underway?
That's a good question. I mean, we at the end of the day, it was really important to me that everybody felt like we were on the same page, that we moved forward together, that it wasn't just a simple, 51% vote and the campaign moves forward with whatever the decision was. We wanted to make sure that everyone was fully bought in, that they felt like they had a stake in whatever we were able to achieve. And so that took a lot of relationship building. I spent a lot of time talking with folks, behind the scenes, making sure that their concerns, their priorities were being addressed in those meetings. And it wasn't just me. I mean, there were a lot of people who were doing that because thankfully that was a priority for the campaign. We wanted to make sure that everyone who was at the table was fully bought in. And in the end, people were excited about the voucher model, that shift from the super match to the voucher program. Because of the purity of the system, because it really created that floor for political voice where everyone could have an opportunity to be heard.
So, okay, that's just the work of getting your own side on side, right?
Yeah.
So now, tell me briefly, when the criticism came in, when the opponents' arguments started being heard about this is just welfare for politicians, this is a waste of taxpayer dollars, how did you all, as a campaign, deal with those arguments? Why was it that you all were able to win so handily and put those arguments down? Well,
those were some of the talking points that we had heard all along. We kind of figured that these are the standard things that folks will trot out when they're against public financing. At the end of the day, I think there's just something that people connect with. They understand that we have infrastructure, we have sidewalks, we have police departments, we have fire departments, we have schools, we have healthcare. That these are good for society, and why wouldn't our electoral system need that similar sort of infrastructure? We need everything to be accessible. We need people to be able to run for office. We need people's voices to be heard so that they buy into the system, so that they vote and they want to actually participate. What we have now is the opposite of that. People are not engaging. Campaigns are funded overwhelmingly by some of the wealthiest folks in our city. It's approximately 1% of our city's population that actually funds political campaigns. And so the intention behind this was really to make that connection for folks and make sure that community-based groups were educating their members that this is an opportunity for them to take power and to really engage in the system.
Last question for you. What advice would you have for other organizers in other cities or other states who want to create something similar and get something similar off the ground?
Well, I think one lesson that I learned is that there's a lot of power in going the initiative route and really thinking about how you can bring as many individual community stakeholders to the table to figure out what people want and really making sure that the campaign is of the people and really driven by the people. I think and connected to that, there's an opportunity to authentically engage communities of color and really the new American majority, which people talk about, communities of color, women, young people. Oftentimes these are communities that are less likely to vote, and that's one of the big problems we see in the campaign cycle. Limited amount of money, limited amount of time, and so people focus on the 51% of the most likely voters. I think this campaign really showed that by engaging authentically these communities and these community-based organizations in driving this work, we can be much more successful and we can inspire folks to want to get engaged.
Well, Estevan, thanks so much for coming and telling us a little bit more about how it happened and how these pieces came together. It's really fascinating.
Yeah, thank you.
We've been hearing from Estevan Muñoz-Howard, one of the lead organizers of the campaign that created Democracy Vouchers. The system is getting put into place as we speak, and in January 2017, the first of the vouchers will get sent out. But before that, the city will be sending information to citizens of Seattle, educating them on the process of how to use and how to spend these vouchers in city elections.